Hey guys, this is Dave the Software Dev again, and this is going to be the fifth and final video of our Let's Make a Video Game Snake tutorial series. We're going to add a score, and we're going to add a game over screen, and we're going to add a few more levels to the game. So let's start with our score. Inside of our index function here, where we draw the grid, or not index function, our index HTML file, I'm going to add a function to draw a score. And I'm going to put that in my snake grid, and the reason I'm doing that is because that's where all of my other draw functions are. So we're just going to create a draw score function. And what this is going to do is it's going to put your score on the top left hand side in this little block right here. So there is our scoring function. It'll basically, within a context of a canvas in an HTML5 canvas, in order to set the color of your text that you're going to be drawing, you have to use the fill style property, and you actually got to give it a style as though you're in a style sheet. So I've set it to the color white, which is red, green, blue, 255, 255, 255. I've also chosen a font of 30 pixels Verdana, and I have here's the call to the context fill text. This is what actually draws the text on the screen. So you give it a string to draw. We're going to be setting up a scoring system, and we're just going to store that score in a number, snake.score, and these are the X and Y coordinates to draw that text. And because that score is going to be on top of a couple of our tiles in the game, I also set those tiles to redraw themselves every time the score is drawn on top of them. So let's set up that score. I'm going to go to snake.js, and we're going to initialize it to 0. And in our collision detection here, every time that you grab a piece of food, I'm going to increment your score. So here you can see we have our score drawing at the top left hand side of the screen. I'm going to grab a couple of pieces of food, and there the score incremented. So our game is actually properly keeping score of grabbing our pieces of food now. If I go under the score, that's fine because it'll redraw on top of the snake. Okay, so let's add a game over indicator. I'm going to add an if here on my index.html. So if our game is over, then instead of drawing the grid, we want to call snake.drawGameOver, and we don't want to loop anymore, so we're not going to set that timeout. We're just going to draw our game over screen, and that'll be it. So I'm going to put that in my snake grid function, or a file rather. And we're going to create a function called snakeDrawGameOver. So there is my drawGameOver function. We set the fill style just like we did for the score, but I'm using a color of red, 255 red, 0 green, 0 blue. I'm also setting a global alpha on my context to 0.75. That means that whatever I draw is not going to be fully opaque, but it's going to be 3/4, opaque, so you can see what's beneath it. I then just simply draw a rectangle that is using the fillRect function. These are the top left-hand coordinates of your rectangle, 0, 0, and then these are the bottom right-handed coordinates, 800 by 600. That way my rectangle will cover my entire canvas. I then set my style to white again, and I draw the text Game Over at position 300, 280. So let's see what that looks like. Going to refresh. I'm just going to run into the wall. Game over. So now we can actually tell what's happening whenever our snake stops moving. Grab a couple of pieces of food here, and then I'll collide with the snake itself. Game over. So the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add some additional levels. So we'll go to our snake level here, and we've only got the one. Let's just add a couple of more. I'm going to start by copying this, and I'll just change it. Okay, so I've added 3 levels here. We have our first level, which is just an empty floor, and then I've got a block of walls in the middle on the second level, another block on the third level, and then I just made a little smiley face for our final level. So now we want the little guy to actually move between levels. So I'm back here in my check collisions function in my snake.js, and basically I'm going to add a rule that if the score is 5, that's awfully low, but that's just for the purposes of this demo, then you're going to move to the next level. So here's how we do that. I check that the score is 5, and if it is, then I'm going to increment a level number that I'll keep track of. I'm going to stop the snake from moving. I'm also going to stop the snake from growing, because he would have grown. You just picked up a piece of food, so he's going to be trying to grow whenever you move to the next level. And I'm going to reset the score back to 0 for that new level. Lastly, I call our load grid function with our new level. So the last thing I should have to do is go to the top of this and set snake.level equal to 0, because that's the one that we start with. Okay, there's one thing that I forgot when I'm loading the next level. I also need to clear our snake, because the load grid is going to basically generate a new snake for us. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So here's where we stopped last time. I'm going to refresh, and then I'll move around to get 5 points, and we'll see what happens. And there it loaded our second level. Let's try again to make sure it'll go on to the next level. There's our third level. And then there's our last level. So obviously 5 is super easy. You're going to want to set your score to, maybe 25, and that'll make the game a whole lot more interesting. So I hope you've enjoyed this series of tutorials. I'm going to put the full code of the snake game up on GitHub, so you can download it there as you're working along with it. If you like this series, please share it with your friends, and subscribe to my feed, as I'm going to be adding some more tutorials in the future.